So I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. I didn't pitch it that way because I'm actually going to present the same talk with a lot of extra filler at MISA, which is the Municipal Security IT Conference, in about, when is it? It's not next week because that's sector, it's the week after. So this really is like Toronto's version of security summer camp, right? But it's not summer. So what do we want to call it? Our back to school camp or something like that? Like it's all security all the time. So if we're all here or at sector or at MISA or wherever, hopes nothing really happens out there because we're not there to fix it. Anyway, I need to get some water and let's get this show on the road. Come on, technology's letting me down. I changed the batteries, I swear. No, it's the remote control, that's all. I did, but then I turned it back on. There we go. So that's me. As you can hear, I'm recovering from a sore throat all week. So you can follow me on Twitter. That's my work address there. I tend not to get too snarky on Twitter. I tend to like to be a little irreverent, if you will. So I actually work for MNP. How many people have heard of MNP? What do you know about us? Other than sponsoring, because I get to talk for 10 minutes tomorrow, so I'll clue you in tomorrow about what we are and what we aren't. I'll give you a clue. We used to be NCI. So what are we trying to do in security? It's an interactive talk. Come on, coffee's kicking in. What are we actually trying to do here in security? Some of you guys are new. Some of you guys have been around a long time. Some of you guys got more gray hair than I do. What are we doing here? No, that's the law thing down the road. Okay? We're trying to support the business, right? Of course. That's like, we don't exist within these business entities just to do security for security's sake. We're trying to support the business. That's kind of a duh moment, but what does that really mean? And don't anyone try to stand up and talk about the CIA triangle. Have you ever tried to have that discussion with someone from the business? CIA, properties of your information, and we're protecting it. And they're like, what are you talking about, man? So let me give you some examples of some security objectives from a business point of view. And I cribbed these from some of the material that I pulled. So I'm not just making this up. This is from some other documents, right? So here's some examples of some business objectives that we support. Invoices are accessible and only to accountants and the collections team. Paid invoices are kept for 3 years and then destroyed after no more than 4 years. Now, in your head, what I want you to do... Oh, sorry. No, there's no... You guys ever seen Death by PowerPoint? Yeah? I actually abide by that. So if you catch a bullet point, let me know, because that's a mistake. There should be no bullet points. So as I'm saying these objectives, I want you in your head to think, well, the C and the I and the A, what is that really affecting here, right? So another example would be the system registers the username, date, and time every time an invoice is created. Yeah, these are all kind of billing-related stuff, right? But let me skip to some other ones. The license for the system is up to date. Fewer than 5 errors per 100 invoices. The system hosted internally in the data center is under controlled environmental conditions that provide reasonable safeguards against flood, fire, etc. Right? That doesn't talk. This is the language that sometimes the rest of the business talks about. They need to keep the business running. They want invoices paid on time. Now, I could draw examples from payroll, right? Because people want to be paid, and they want to be paid on time. And if you don't get paid on time, people get very upset. How many get upset when their expenses don't get paid on time? Yeah, but does anybody really think about the availability of the expenses system? Only when they don't get their expenses on time. So that's what we're trying to do, in my opinion, is from the business perspective, we're trying to help the business keep doing what it does, both creating value for our customer base so we can make that fat stacks of cash, but also to make sure that the other stuff that businesses have to do just keep on working the way they should be working. Because what's the yarn about security? When we do our job well, nobody notices us. And then they cut our funding because obviously there's no problems, right? But how do we do this? How do we do this? Well, traditionally, we implement controls. Now, by controls, I mean, in this talk, asset-level technical controls. We do the firewalls. We do the antivirus. We do the data leakage prevention. Who's doing any data leakage prevention? I kept trying to recommend that, and people go, that was 1999. Nobody buys that shit anymore. Pardon my French. But that's what I'm talking about when I mean controls. So if you start thinking, well, Jason, controls are policies and procedures and all this other stuff. Yes, you're right, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But I mean more specifically, we like our fancy boxes that have blinky lights, and we like to put them in. We like to buy technology, and we like to deploy it. And then we like to think that that's all that we need to do. Now, I mentioned before that some people might think policies are control. Who thinks policies are controls? Good, I love you all. Because I don't think policies are controls. Now, I have some accounting friends who do assurance audits at MNP who would disagree with me. Now, the reason I don't think policies are controls is because the policy is just a statement of intention. We intend to do something. Okay, that's great. Did you? Show me. So that's how we do these things, right? We implement these controls and we pick a framework, or maybe a framework has been chosen for us, and then we go and we implement all the controls in that framework. So who's got a favorite framework here? Come on, call it out. Come on, call it out. What's your favorite framework? ISO. Which one? Okay. Not 18, not 05, 2 particularly. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone who loves PCI? Oh, John loves, because he works for the council, so of course he loves PCI. They pay his paycheck. Anyone like that cybersecurity framework? Anyone digging that? Yes. High trust, which is really just the cybersecurity framework. Anyone like, what's the Canadian one? There's a Canadian one, ITSG-33. Is that the one? You can tell I'm very familiar with the Government of Canada and Ontario regulations. Which is really just NIST 853 with some maple syrup poured on top. So we implement all these controls, off we go, but, oh, there's a bullet. Dang, missed it. Breaches just keep happening, right? They just keep happening. What's the latest breach? I'm fatigued. I don't even pay attention anymore. I listen to Risky Biz, and I kind of go, oh, another breach. What is it this week? What's the one that just happened? Someone tell me. What? Okay. What the ransomware hospitals I remember. What was the one you were saying? Jordache? I don't know that one. No. Food? Really? Okay. I heard one about Zynga Games. So there's a guy at M&P who he likes to kind of keep track of this and send it out to the rest of the senior managers in the firm to go, look, we're here, we're cyber, we can help you because look at all the bad stuff that's happening. But, controls. So how's that working out for us? So in the first 6 months of 2019, which I realize we have another 3 months that we've put under our belt, but I got this from this report here. So the slides will be available at some point, so don't try to copy that if you don't want to. But I got it from that page, and in the first 6 months, that's how many disclosures. That's just the ones we know about, of course, because there's some that don't bother to report. They still try to sneak away and get under the radar. That's 4.1 billion records. That's 55% of the population of the Earth. So half the Earth has free credit reporting now. And all you have to do is wait for a little bit more. If your credit reporting is expired, wait a little bit and you'll get some more free credit reporting. So it's not getting better. Is it getting worse? I don't know. There was a paper a couple years ago at Weiss, which is the economic, what is it? It's economics as it is applied to information security, and they published a paper, they did some research where they basically said, it doesn't look like that the situation is getting worse per se, it's just we get better reporting, and we're more aware of it, and it's in the news. But from my feeling from when I talk to people who aren't here at BSides, is it is getting worse, and what are we going to do about it, right? Well, the business. don't get me started on that. I only have 25 minutes. Okay, so we got a lot of controls, but let's pick some controls. Oh, that one came up too fast. So we noticed some control frameworks out there, right? We got PCI, we got ISO this, we got... How many are familiar with the critical security controls? From used to be SANS, now it's CIS. M&P really likes them because they're pretty basic, but they're also very implementable, and they're very do this, do this, do this, and you should be good. Well, baseline anyways. So what if we combine them, which you can do because this lovely company here, the Unified Common Controls Hub, which if you're an ISC member, apparently we get like a free membership to log into these things. Now, it's a free basic membership because there's some really advanced stuff that they do. But I bring these up because there is a way, other than Excel, that you can take these frameworks and combine them together and actually see what would it look like if I created a Franken framework and said, well, I need to do ISO and I like this, and I put them all together, what we go. Okay, so we can do that, and we can now comply with not just all the controls, but all the frameworks. But that's just kicking the can down the road, right? So there's my two lovely pictures, kicking the can down the road. Let's stop kicking the can down the road. But I'll get to how we stop doing that in a minute. Let's run a little, this is the dashboard. This is one part of the screen from the Unified, or the Common Controls Hub. So this is PCI. So PCI, there's a lot of numbers here. I'm not going to go into them. The one that's really important here is it that one there? Yes, that's the mandated control. So look at this number here, mandated. Now, if someone wants to ask me a question, I'll explain more about what the other numbers are, but let's just stick to the point here. So there are 365 mandated PCI controls. That's one for every day of the year. It's a convenient number. Did you do that on purpose, you guys? It just happened that way. But hey, 4.0 is coming, and it's going to get shorter, isn't it? Yeah. Everyone keeps asking me, what's happening in 4.0? And I said, probably not good things. Are you having challenges with 3.2? Yes. Well, then 4.0 is not going to be your friend. So that's PCI. Well, let's take a look at the CIS, the critical security controls. Oh, wow, that's not so bad. 223 mandated ones. But if you've ever looked at them, some of those controls are just batshit insane. Like, do you turn your servers off when you don't use them? Well, I'm sure if you're the DoD, maybe you do, but the rest of the businesses are like, what are you talking about, right? Or do you keep your, what's the control? I'm paraphrasing now, but if you have templates for your virtual machines, do you keep them stored offline with file integrity monitoring and disconnected and air-gapped? Seriously, that's what the control says. And that's one of those, right? So some of them are a bit out there. Most of them are pretty good, but that's the CSC. Well, here's ISO 27002. See, I anticipated. I didn't know. I just figured enough new. This is like, ISO's like the granddaddy of the security frameworks, right? It's been around forever. Who remembers what it was born as? BS? Wrong. No. 7799. That shows how long I've been at this. I look younger than I am. So it's got 163, but for anyone who's actually read it, it's so objective-based. It's like, you should have a risk management program. And that's all they say. They don't, right? It's not quite that stark, but it's kind of like that, right? Like, you should do third-party supply chain management. And then they don't really give you a lot of guidance. That's why they have to go back to ISO and buy the 18s and the 19s and the 35s. Or hire M&P, and we'll come and help you out. So the NIST CSF, a framework that really just reorganizes all the other frameworks so we can talk about it a little bit better. I like the NIST CSF, but I get customers who say, I want to be audited and comply with the NIST CSF. And I'm like, that's not actually how NIST CSF works, Mr. Customer. But sure, we'll accommodate you and see what we can do. 132 mandated requirements, all right? Now, if we mush these together and we come up with our Franken framework, there's some overlap. How many total requirements do you think you're going to get? Anybody? Anyone want to take a betting pool? 380? 450? I honestly can't remember. It's been a hell of a week for me. That's okay. So I combined just these two first. So if you combine PCI and CSC, there's 537 total controls because there's only, where is it? Where's the overlap? Oh, I didn't see it. There's only about 40% overlap between those two control frameworks. So if you were completely PCI compliant and you said, well, how do I do against the CSC? You're only going to hit about 40% of the CSCs. And the reverse is the same. If you were completely CSC compliant, including the crazy ones, how good do I do on PCI? About 40%. Okay, so I combined CSF and ISO together as well to see what that was like, and that was about 271. And the reason I did it that way is these are very technical frameworks, and these are more governance, high level of frameworks, right? But let's mush them both together and see. 480, there was a 300 something, 762. Good luck with that. You ever going to get there? How many are close to retirement age? Do they hope? Some of those guys in school, you might get there. But of course, we'll have new frameworks to go for, right? Because who announced it? The Department of Defense in the States recently announced their capability maturity. The CMMC is the acronym, and basically they're going to attach some stuff to NIST 800-171. So there's another framework you got to learn. Anyway, I'm trying to illustrate a point here that we implement controls and we implement frameworks, and this is just kicking the can down the road because it's not helping. Like it's yet another control, yet another control, yet another control. Now, it seemed like a good idea back in the early days, right? How many read The Cuckoo's Egg? Okay, good. Apparently, Cliff Stoll was in BSides St. John or something like that. One of my coworkers got to actually autograph his book and shake his hand. I'm a bit jealous. Then, who's got a copy of Implementing Firewalls? Belvin and somebody else. You got, yes. I looked. I'm like, I have a copy of this somewhere. First edition or second edition? Or both? First? Yeah. Well, first is about this thick and second doubled it, right? So it seemed like a good idea. I'm going back in time because it seemed like a good idea at the time. Bad guys get in this way. Well, let's implement a control to keep them out. Bad guys get in this way. Similar another control to get it out, right? So we start with firewalls and we start with antivirus because back in the days that was the two main ways to do it. Well, that worked. How do we know it worked? Because the bad guys found another way to get in, and then we implement a control for that. Now they're stealing data. Let's implement data leakage prevention. And on we go, and we just keep kicking that can down the road. But they just keep doing it, right? Now, that's why I'm highlighting here that it suggests the controls that these frameworks deploy suggest a certain risk profile. They suggest a certain threat actor is going to do a certain thing, so let's deploy controls, and that should help us manage our risk. Except if we're doing it implicitly, we're not kind of taking the bull by the horns and doing it in an explicit way. Now, I'm not going to veer off into a risk management talk. I have one of those, maybe next year. For those who want a little sneak about what I think about risk management, go look up OpenFair and everything around that. Or if someone doesn't show up later, I can just do that talk if you want. I got it on my laptop. So this is my contention here, that the control focus of our that our industry has taken for 15 or more years is proven ineffective, right? I think not that we have to throw away controls. Controls are necessary, but they're not sufficient. We need the controls. They help us do the job that we're doing, but we can't just take that control focus approach, right? Let's take a different approach. So I don't know who said that, so I don't attribute it to anyone. Some people say it was Keynes, economist, famous dead guy. Here's another quote for you. There's another man I would like to meet. He said that 19 years ago. We still haven't really absorbed what he was trying to say. I encourage you to actually go back and read that article and some of the other stuff from back then. That was back when he was publishing Cryptogram or whatever it was, and he had a lot of good material back then. Since then, he's wrote a number of books. I've stopped reading his books because he's starting to repeat himself. Because there's only so many times you can say the same thing in different ways, right? Like it's not, he's basically saying this over and over and over and over again. And not enough of us and not enough of the business are paying attention. So let's take a different approach. And my approach that I would suggest to us, and I've started to try to get my customers to take this approach, is a process maturity approach. Now, who's bumped into business process optimization, lean IT, or manufacturing side, lean approaches? That's where this kind of emerges out of. Now, if you go back to 27,000, okay, yeah, I better hurry up. If you go back to 27,001 and 27,002, the expectation, if you read between the lines, was you were going to build process maturity around those controls. You weren't just going to do them, you were going to do something else, right? So here are some poor attempts to do that. Well, let's take NIST CSF and bolt on, or ISO 27001, and we'll bolt on the capability maturity model. Who knows the capability maturity model? It's the 5-level, or with 6 if you want to include not doing anything. Not doing anything, up, all the way up to optimized. It's like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs for software processing. So that's what we do. And if you read the NIST, they have implementation tiers, right? And everyone goes, oh, wow, that's maturity. Except right in the NIST CSF document, it says, this is not maturity. Don't use it that way. But everyone that I've seen who tries to implement uses it that way. So let's not do that. And I've seen it applied to ISO 27002, right? Deployed, partially deployed, mostly deployed, fully deployed. Okay. But it's talking about I took a control and I deployed it, not I took a control and put a process around it. So there are a few suggestions out there for how to do this. Now, I want to ask the audience, and you only have 30 seconds to give me this type of stuff, is what kind of processes do you guys see in information security on a recurring basis? It could be annual, it could be monthly, it could be daily, it could be weekly. Yes? Okay, yeah? Hey? Backups? How come patching wasn't the first one you guys said? Vulnerability scanning, patching, those kind of things. Yeah, exactly. Now, we need to do these quicker so that we can get in an OODA loop, or if you prefer, a plan, do, check, act loop. And that's the way we're going to learn. So when we get in a process and we're able to implement the feedback on that process, we're able to learn. Hopefully we can learn faster than the bad guys, but we must learn how we're doing it. Now, I'm going to skip over this slide because this is the one I want to talk about, right? Because you're like, Jay, what the heck are you talking about? Process, maturity, and all that stuff. So you can read as well as I can, so I'll shut up for 10 seconds and you guys read that. Okay, you got it? Good? Good? Does it make sense? I tried to cut out it's kind of jargony, but kind of not. I tried to cut it out, right? So here's the 5 levels that we're used to seeing. Some people call the different levels different things, but basically it's 5 levels. And just so you know, there's an ISO standard for this. It's 15544 or something. I had to look it up. I had no idea. Well, I wasn't surprised. If you can think of it, there's an ISO standard for it. It's probably an ISO standard for how to put avocado on toast by now. So what's available out there? There are really only 2 that are really good. There's one that just came out, the CMMC from the Department of Defense, but to me that sounds like NIST 800-171 with CMMI bolted on. Time will tell. They only really just released a bunch of paper or a bunch of news press releases, so none of the details are out there. But the 2 that I like that I've seen, there's that one, right? So this is why I'm not encouraged by some of the stuff they say, because they go, look, we're just going to combine these and we're gonna put some maturity levels on there. They want to do it for their supply chain management. So time will tell on that one, whether it's true maturity and process capability or whether it's just you got to do it because if you want to sell to the Department of Defense, that's what you have to do. So this is one that I found. The OPEN, that's the O, Information Security Management Maturity Model. Now that's a mouthful. OPEN meaning the open group oversees this. right? The open group, guys who hold the copyrights for Unix, those guys, TOGAF, that kind of stuff. They're a process-based approach. They break down information security as a system within the organization into 45 total processes, 16 of which are considered essential. And it doesn't, what I think is important, because I love risk management stuff, what I think was interesting is he explicitly says in the standard it doesn't lead with risk management. Okay. Risk management is a big part of it. There are a handful of those processes that speak directly to risk management, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Now, the motivating thought behind the OISM 3 is every security control that you might think of, technical asset controls, needs some kind of process around it to manage and improve it and maintain it, and that's where they get to. Now another one, so here's kind of a breakdown. They break it into 4 levels. G for general, that's the top level kind of governance type stuff. Strategic, where you're trying to align the needs of the business and the strategy of the business to the security strategy. If your security strategy, how many have heard this? If your security strategy doesn't line up with your business, you're kind of doing it wrong. Then we go into the technical security things, which would be kind of at the level of the leadership of the information security operations, and then the operational practices, right? Now this is just the essentials. There's a whole bunch of other ones. This is some of the other ones and where they might map, right? So you can do some of these and you'll get a high benefit, but it costs a lot of money. And what do you call it if it's not essential? If you label it not essential, then people aren't going to do it, right? So I put this in a report, and I had to come up with a creative name that meant not essential, but didn't actually stop them from trying to do that. Okay, so that's one. The other one that I really like out there is the Cybersecurity Capability Maturity Model. Another mouthful. C2M2 comes from the Department of Energy, and they're kind of pushing on this one. So, oh man, no more bullets. Sorry about that, guys. The focus is on IT and OT. OT is just computers not doing other stuff, right? We all know what OT is. Everyone's like, OT, it's so different. It's like it's a general purpose computer. It just happens to be plugged into your waste processing plant instead of your projector. 10 domains, and there's the domains that they break them down into, right? So the way they did it was they structured it more like a traditional security framework where they took processes and the maturity levels of those processes and map them into 10 kind of bigger level buckets. So that's how it breaks out. MIL 1, MIL 2. MIL is maturity index level. Don't get too worried about it being military's focused. It's just an unfortunate side effect. So here's kind of some of the stuff you would do for the different MIL levels, right? MIL 0, nothing. MIL 1, you have ad hoc processes, quality might be variable, but at least you have processes that you're doing, right? Then you start to document them, and adequate resources. The business needs to provide adequate resources to these. The adequate resources aren't necessarily trained yet. We just have enough people. Down here in MIL 3 is when we provide them with the skills and the knowledge, right? But anyway, you can break it down, and now you can start to progress from we don't have anything to we have this to we have, and on we go. Now, wall of text, sorry, get the presentation, take a look at this, go get the documentation if you want, look at this. Every single one of those domains has this for every sub-process that they're going to suggest. All right, so I sped up there near the end, so what the heck just happened? I came to BSides and I wanted some fancy hacking stuff. This guy's talking about process, what the heck? So 2 things happened, at least I hope 2 things happened. I hope I convinced you that controls are beside the point. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient to what we need to do. And 2, try to start thinking about the process. Be consistent and persistent in that process and keep moving towards higher maturity levels. Yeah, take your controls, implement them to the process, and hopefully we'll get there. I'm hoping the first step down a road of a shift in the way people talk. I'm here all day if anyone wants to bounce ideas off me, but this is what I am starting to sell to my customers at M&P. And that's that. I finished with 1 minute to spare. Any questions? Do we have time for questions? No time. It's up to. I'm not the organ. You. Well, let's ask. Any questions? There might not be any. No, that was either a really good talk or it was really boring. Oh. Yep.
So all the cloud audit reporting frameworks are heavily controls based, like extremely controls based. Like FedRAMP's like, do you have passwords? How long are they? All the old school stuff.
Yeah.
And some of the process stuff that you had up tend to be somewhat too utterly opaque to the customer.
Yes.
Do you see process maturity coming into the cloud audit reporting space, and what would that look like if it did go that way?
That's an excellent question. I don't know. I would like to see it because you're absolutely right. When you go to Azure, you go to Amazon, what do you get to download? You get to download their attestation of compliance or their SOC 2 report. So what? What if you fall down? Are you getting better? Are you getting more capable? Because has anyone been through a SOC 2 assessment? Yeah. Do the bad guys care about your SOC 2 assessment? Really, it comes down to you implemented what you said you were going to implement, and it's functioning the way you said it was going to function. So what? Right? Sorry, are there any CPAs in the audience that I'm offending? Is that one of the isms that I get kicked out for? Okay, I'm safe. Like I know the CPAs and the SOC 2s and those assurance part, they're trying hard to help. But I would say that we through technology came up and we implemented controls, and they implemented a different set of controls organized a different way. Is still not working, right? I'd like to see it change. But the way I see it changing is it's not going to change unless we start asking the cloud providers, well, that's great, but what about, can you show me an assessment against C2M2? And the Department of Energy, who's behind that, can actually push on that and say, you want to sell us stuff, you want us to use yours, can you demonstrate that to us, right? And while I think the DoD one with the CMMC might be a little bit of a lame duck, time will tell, at least it's moving in the right direction, which is don't tell me you have a control or not have a control. Tell me how well it's implemented, right? So it's the best answer I got for you. That's it. Well, thank you for your time. Have a good rest of the conference.
Thank you.